The pub was not far from the house where he lived, but he had never gone there before. It was next to the tennis club, and it was called the Center Court. Champagne and fine wines were good, of course, but he hadn't tasted a decent hard cider in ages. He had recently heard that this establishment made their own, so he decided to give it a try. He wasn't disappointed and tried their lunch menu. The sliced baked potatoes sprinkled with chili con carne and drizzled with sour cream were to his liking. It was time to leave, and he wondered if the owner was going to bottle his bottled cider. It would be just fine if he could take some home with him. Then there was a commotion in the bar, caused by a group of guys. They looked like rugby players, not the sort of crowd you'd expect to find here. And they were all laughing. All but one. Of all the ways to die, he often thought that death by suffocation was one of the worst. Not necessarily because of the pain, more because of the circumstances under which it could happen. Imagine you are sitting at the dinner table or at your favorite restaurant. All of a sudden you are dying with your family and friends, and your last memory is of them all laughing at you. They smile, say something like, "Must have walked in the wrong place," and pat you on the back. Too late, they realize how serious it was. Their laughter will also be their last memory. By the time he got to their table, the gasping guy was starting to turn blue and the laughter had subsided. They parted and let him pass forward. He knew the Heimlich maneuver could be done with the victim sitting up, but this guy was huge. He lifted him to his feet and enclosed him in a bear hug, pinning his arms to his sides. He ran the thumb of one fist just above where he thought his belly button should be. Gripping his fist with his other hand, he entered it as hard as he could and lifted it upward. For a moment it looked like they were pretending to have sex. The victim was a very large man, and it didn't work until the third try. It was a large piece of hamburger bun. It got a little embarrassing after that. He felt bad about being treated like a hero. All the guys were slapping him on the back without stopping, even when it started to hurt. Then they stood there with a slumped look, realizing they didn't know what to do. The big guy's name was Sven, and that seemed quite appropriate for such a giant. They exchanged phone numbers and offered more cider, which was politely declined since our hero was driving. He was also offered a lifetime thank you, which he accepted with a smile. Sven looked fine now, but his friends persuaded him to take him to the hospital for a checkup. It was doubtful that much damage had been done to him, but he was without oxygen for a while. About a week later, Sven called his rescuer and they met for a drink together. The hero didn't really want to go, but decided it was best to get it over with. The conversation went mostly along the lines of, "Anything I can do for you." And finally it was over. It was a great idea to begin with. My wife Judy had played a lot of tennis at the university and was good enough to represent the county. Now she wanted to take lessons at the local club again. She always had somewhere to improve, and I saw no reason why she shouldn't. I'm the boss of my own company and doing very well, thank you, so she never needed to work. And our son Neil is in college now, so she has plenty of free time, and I paid for a month's worth of tuition. It'll be good for her to get out of the house. I'll come to Collins every Tuesday morning. They have different beginning levels, and I want to start with intermediate. But it'll be a little while before I get to the higher level and bring in a higher level trainer. Go ahead, I said. It'll keep you out of trouble. Now that Neil had flown away, it would be good for her to develop other interests. I don't know how she'd stand the endless coffee mornings and sit-downs with the ladies who lunch. That first Tuesday, Judy smelled coffee brewing and came down to see me off to work. It was a good start. She usually lay in bed too long. She was wearing an old t-shirt and the same shorts. She looked around at herself. I'm not in the shape I should be, so I'll be sweating for the first few lessons. This isn't a fashion show. You look fine. She'd obviously showered when I got home, but apparently hadn't expended enough energy at the club. Our lovemaking that night was wild. It was worth a few tennis lessons. Near the end, the head of the bed started banging against the wall. The sound made me smile, and we collapsed after our shared ecstasy. Judy whispered in my ear, "You need to move the bed further into the room again. That noise almost repulses me, only almost." "I know," I said. "The damn thing keeps crawling back against the wall. I can't imagine what makes it move that far. I'll look into it tomorrow." Wednesday morning, I fixed the noise problem. It was an old iron bed that once belonged to my grandfather. I don't know why I was so attached to it. It was an ugly old thing. The culprit of the noise was a brass knob in the center of the railing at the headboard of the bed. There was a dent in the plaster on the wall from all the knocks it had taken. It was time to do something more permanent than constantly pulling her out of her precarious position. The handle had unscrewed, but that only made it look stupid. Anyway, if I left it alone, some other part of the bed would make contact with it. And then it hit me. I found what I wanted in the kitchen. It was small enough to fit in my hand. It was an inch or so of yellow sponge with a green squeegee part on one side. "What do you say, baby?" "What is it?" "It's one of those dishwashing thingies. The rough part rests against a brass ball, and the spongy part is pressed against the wall. It's held in place with sticky tape. Problem solved." "You old geezer. Why don't you just buy a new bed? Buy us something more modern. It's not like we can't afford it. You have the money." "I got rich by not wasting money, and actually I like this bed. My mom was conceived in it." "I'm sorry, but I find it a little creepy." "But it's comfortable, and now when we bang it against the wall, it doesn't make a sound." "And where did the dent go?" "I filled it with polyfill. Do you want to try out the bed?" "You have to go to work." "I'm the boss. I'm allowed to come in late." We collapsed on the bed and entertained ourselves in relative silence. The sponge was working. Just 1 week of tennis lessons, and Judy was promoted to the top student level, and we booked her lessons again with another instructor, a more expensive one, of course. His name is Edward, and he will only be teaching here for 2 summer months. Then he's off to Wimbledon, where he's going to be head coach of the All-England Tennis and Croquet Club. "I thought it was just called Wimbledon. I didn't know they played croquet there." "Well, now you know. Is the new outfit because you're a top student, or is it purely to please that Edward guy?" She was now wearing a thin, tight t-shirt over a seamless sports bra. The top wasn't very long, and it showed her belly button. The shorts were tiny, too, not at all like the ones worn by track and field athletes, except they weren't usually white. Camel toes were visible on the legs. "It's not for him, silly. Soon I'll be their top student. The others will look up to me. I'll be expected to look more professional than the rest." "And you said this wasn't a fashion show." I began to suspect that the following week Judy had booked an additional Thursday morning class as well. But this extra class was not a club class. They were private lessons with an hourly fee. Apparently the new trainer usually had Thursday off, so he could charge as much as he wanted. The pay was just prohibitive. He must be making almost as much as me. I decided I needed to take a look at this Edward, just out of curiosity, you understand. But, as usual, I was free at work. A problem arose on Thursday morning, and it really required my involvement. My team and I spent over 4 hours solving it, and I treated them all to a late lunch. Watching Judy's lesson on Thursday would now be impossible, and there was no point in trying to observe her next Tuesday, as that lesson was not an individual lesson. Edward would have to be observed for another week. Judy told me that she had a busy time with him from 9 to 10. There was no problem with work this time, so I took Thursday morning off. I went to work as usual, but switched to one of our company cars. I then drove to the tennis club and waited outside where I could see the courts. Judy arrived at 8:45 and got out of the car dressed in a baggy sports uniform. She had a large gym bag in her hands and went inside to change. There were several courts here, and she went back to the one on my left. At 9 o'clock she was there and again in white, but no longer in a cropped t-shirt. She had changed into an outfit I had never seen before. The top was thin straps and almost backless. It was made of a thicker material than the t-shirt, but not tight enough to hide the fact that she no longer wore a bra. It tried its best to keep her breasts from rippling, but wasn't really succeeding. When she started pitching and making volleys, she'd be lucky if her breasts stayed in place. To match the top, she bought a white pleated skirt that barely covered her tiny white panties. It wasn't quite a thong, but it was certainly very high, all the way up to her thighs. There was no more than an inch of material between her legs. As I watched her, she half turned away from me and bent over to retie the lace on her shoe, showing me around. I wondered if she did that often. And now I changed my mind about her outfit. She might even be wearing a one-piece leotard, under a skirt that would make a ballerina proud. As if my suspicions weren't already heightened, I was startled when her coach showed up. Edward looked like a Greek god. His soft blonde hair fell in lovely waves, covering his ears. The dark stubble made me wonder if his head hair was dyed. His skin was muscular and golden brown, and his teeth almost glistened when he smiled, and he smiled often. If the Greeks had a god of seduction, here he was in the flesh. Judy had put on a little lipstick and looked gorgeous. Even with her dark brown hair and a ponytail, it looked great in the sunlight, and her slender, trim legs always attracted the eyes of men. The chances of her noticing me were slim, but I didn't need to watch the whole class. After half an hour or so, I went and found the club's entertainment rooms. There was a good selection of fruit juices and other healthy drinks, but I settled for coffee and found a free newspaper. I was just starting my second cup and was engrossed in an article on corporate finance when I glanced at the clock. It was almost 10:20. I said, "Oh, is there a problem?" the pretty woman sitting at my table asked. I didn't even notice her presence. "No, sorry, I didn't realize it was that late." "And 10:20 is late?" She smiled. Well, that's too long for a shower after a tennis lesson, but she didn't need to know that. We introduced ourselves, her name was Petra, and soon got to talking. She told me that the club was very excited about the new coach, even though he was working for them on a temporary basis. "It's a shame he's only here for the summer. He's off to Wimbledon in September. We are so lucky to have him. I have an hour with him at 11. "And where is he now?" asked I. "He'll be on one of the courts. I'm told the contestant ahead of me has booked him for 2 hours. I wish I could afford that much time." "I'm just a visitor, thinking of joining," I said. "Could you show me where the classes are held, if you don't mind?" We went outside, and she started singing the club's dithyrambs and urging me to join. I wondered if she was getting a finder's fee or a commission. I asked if I could look at her membership card and write down her membership number. "That's odd," she said. "I don't see Edward anywhere. He was here earlier with the woman in white." "Sounds very Wimbledon," I remarked. "Actually, her clothes were too sexy for Wimbledon. She's probably showing off or trying to seduce him. I wonder where she gets her second hour." I did too, and I wondered what exactly she was studying. Maybe how to become a Greek goddess. Maybe Edward is exploring her sweaty places? "Do you have indoor courts?" I asked. "Oh, yes, but no one uses them when the weather is this sunny. We don't have enough instructors to train outdoors and indoors at the same time." I thanked her for her time, apologized, and left. Soon I found the indoor facilities. I was walking down the hallway when suddenly I heard Judy's voice from around the corner. "Then Eddie, same time next week. I can't wait." Before they were in sight, I ducked into the restroom and immediately panicked when I discovered it was female. I heard a second voice, presumably Edward's. "I have to wait a whole week? You're the best sex I've had in years. Let's have a quickie in Juju's bathroom." "Eddie? Juju?" It didn't take long. "No! You have another class at 11. I'll call you later if I get a chance." The door opened and I froze. Judy pulled back halfway, kissing it. Their arms wrapped around each other and her head was between Eddie and me. His eyes were closed, so neither of them noticed me. I retreated to the nearest stall and quietly closed its door. "I really need to show you how to improve your backhand. We should have a love match soon. Best in a proper bed, but I live so far away." "You dirty bastard, Eddie. You've made it clear what you need," she replied. "I'll see what I can do." A moment later, the main door slammed shut with a clatter and Judy stepped into the cubicle next to me. I heard a thump and saw her gym bag fall to the floor. There was a foot-wide gap under the partition. I crouched down and peeked under the partition and was surprised to see that her tennis shoes were still on and her feet were bare. Had she really undressed in the doorway after I hid? I thought she had been wearing them when she went into the ladies' room, but perhaps Eddie Boy had kept them for his collection. I heard her wiping herself thoroughly, and her hand reached into her bag and pulled out a pack of wet wipes. She stood up and tossed the little white skirt to the floor. And then it was clear. I was almost right. The next article of clothing fell next to the skirt. It was essentially the same as a one-piece swimsuit. Judy opened her bag and pulled out a pair of simple panties and her boring running clothes. As she unzipped her pants and pulled them on, I noticed something else in the bag, a tight t-shirt and sexy shorts. They were probably lying around in case I ever looked in there. She pulled out her bra and put it and the t-shirt back on. Finally, she pulled out a small plastic bag and stuffed her sex-stained tennis suit into it. Naturally, this bag was opaque and was stuffed under the tennis rackets. On the way home, I pondered my feelings. I didn't really have any. You don't succeed in business by brooding over emotions when things go wrong. You have to think about how to fix them. You accept failure, learn from it, and move on. As they say in mob movies, business is not the same as personal life. I agree with that. But when it gets personal, it's serious. I was shocked that Judy was having an affair. Okay, I'm not exactly immune to emotion, but I was mad as hell. A tennis coach, for heaven's sake, that was almost as bad as a boss and his secretary. And I was stunned at how quickly she'd gotten this far with the bastard. Just a couple weeks and they were using love nicknames. She must have taken one look at the golden handsome man and thought, cute guy, I'll fuck him. Of course, that sort of thing probably happened to him all the time, but he wasn't going to cuckold me and get away with it. And I thought Judy's enthusiasm was partly because he wasn't going to stick around for very long. She wasn't going to be around very long either. He might never be as rich as I was, but he would become famous. I preferred to stay out of the limelight, but perhaps Judy was attracted to it. Besides, I was extremely annoyed at how careless she had been. She books a 2-hour lesson, spends the first hour on the tennis court where all and sundry can see them both, and then just disappears for the second hour? How many more women will wonder where their heartthrob went? I was almost as furious that she was caught so easily as I was that she opened her legs for Eddie. How could she not get caught? She had to suffer for treating me like an idiot. And so did he. Enough! Emotions need to be controlled. "Oh, you're home early," she said. "Did you have a good session?" She didn't bat an eye. "Great, thanks. He's the best tutor I've ever had." "Are you getting faster, more accurate?" "Not particularly, but I'm getting stronger, and every move I make is getting better now." "Good for you. By the way, I have to go to Birmingham on Thursday. There's a big conference going on there. I'll have to drive there, so I'll leave early. I should be back on Friday." If Thursday is his day off, the afternoon will work for you. And if he lives far away, this house will work. "Will it help your business?" "Not particularly, but it will be good for networking. There will be a lot of top companies there, and that's a lot of potential clients to attract. So I'll stay there overnight. You know how these events go?" I deliberately used the word affair, no response. "It's not like a tennis match," I continued. "When the lesson ends, nothing happens. But in the business world, a lot happens after the conference closes. At one event, a major merger was negotiated at the bar after the conference. They signed the contract over breakfast at the hotel. Anyway, I should be back early Friday morning, maybe even later if I have a few drinks the night before. You know, if I'm still over the driving limit the next day." "That's fine. I'm sure I can find something to entertain myself Thursday night." I don't doubt that for a second. The next day, I called the club from work, giving Petra's membership number to see if Edward could be signed up for a private lesson on Thursday. They apologized, but it was busy all morning and not at all in the afternoon. Perhaps they weren't sure what he would do, but I was sure. There was an ironclad prenup that left Judy to her own devices. It was drawn up to protect my growing business, and that same business owned our home, my house, its contents, and our cars. So the divorce, which was now imminent, was of no concern to me financially, nor was there any real need for any proof. I wasn't particularly interested in catching them at it or getting pictures. What I wanted more than anything was to embarrass and scare her to death and to hurt him. I was somewhat surprised that Judy took such a blatant risk when she had so much to lose. With me, she had a proper lifestyle, enjoyed a nice house and a Porsche Cayman GTS. Okay, she could keep the car, but could she really recreate all the other perks with a simple tennis coach? I assumed he made a lot of money in London, but he was just a glorified teacher, not a famous player. Perhaps he was from a wealthy family. Just for a laugh, I looked up the word juju. The belief that two entities in close contact have similar properties. Perhaps Judy would go blonde. That Thursday, I pretended to leave for Birmingham, but I went to work. After working a couple of hours, I switched cars again and came home, parking on the next street over. She'd be free after 11. At 12, he took another class. Once inside, I made a few simple preparations and noticed her laptop was open. I mindlessly checked the history of her recent visits. There was nothing there about Edward, or even tennis. But one search was interesting. Best places to live in London. Yeah, good luck with that. Judy lay on the bed with his naked torso and watched him undress. It was the most beautiful body she'd ever seen, and he'd told her he loved her. His golden skin was covered in tiny blonde hairs that made him look like he was shimmering. His swim trunks were the last to be removed, and she noticed that there were no tan lines on them. He must have tanned naked or used a tanning bed. Yes, she really thought, this is love, not lust. What the hell was that? Edward said, pulling away and looking around. The tennis ball had bounced from under the bed toward the window, and there was something very ominous about the fact that it had moved without human intervention. "Oh my God!" Judy exclaimed, pushing it away and sitting up. "It must be Colin! He knows! Get out of here, quick!" She swung her legs off the bed, and Edward scrambled to his feet in a panic. The brass knob on the headboard of the bed banged sadly against the wall. "Finished with the lovemaking?" I said, leaning against the door jamb. "Colin!" she exclaimed. "Who the hell?" added Edward. I pointed the gun at his face. "Get up!" Most of his golden skin turned white. "Stop covering yourself and put your hands behind your head! Do it now!" I pointed the gun at him. As if on cue, he peed on the bedroom carpet. I followed him down the stairs and let him put his hands down to open the front door, then pushed him outside. I had already locked all other ways in and out. Judy prudently stayed in the bedroom. I slammed the door shut and went back upstairs, slipping into Neil's old bedroom for a moment before returning to mine. She was sitting on the bed, still completely naked. I had to admire her composure. "It wasn't a real gun," she said. "You're right. I just put it back in Neil's old toy box. The boy in love was fooled. He probably had other things on his mind. I noticed you didn't tell him." "I've never seen you look so angry. I figured it was best to keep quiet. You scared me." "Good move. Tell me something. Were you blackmailed?" "No, but I'd like to explain." "Would an explanation make you feel better?" "Yes." "I have no motivation to improve your mood. Knowing your reasons will only make me more angry. It's divorce time, Judy. You're on a roll. Look on the bright side. I'll let you get dressed first." I looked out the bedroom window. A police car had just pulled up and 2 officers were talking to a naked man. He was holding a plastic bag in front of him, probably borrowed from a nearby construction stall. One of the officers pointed to our house. Edward shook his head and ducked into the car. They drove off. "You probably don't want a divorce. You'll lose everything. It's interesting that you're sitting on the internet looking for a place to live in London. Let me guess. You'd prefer the Wimbledon area, if Edie can afford it." "It was just curiosity. I still love you." Interesting use of the word love. Have you ever been unfaithful to him? Did you sleep with anyone else during your still short relationship, the man next door, the bartender at the club? "No, of course not. So you were faithful to him, but not to me. Is that your definition of love?" I always thought she'd gotten into this affair too quickly, but she was still full of surprises. It was then that Judy jumped out of our marriage. She jumped to her feet. "Okay, you win. I love him more. He's wonderful. File for divorce, you get whatever you want, but I'll get what I deserve. A man who will end up richer than you, more famous." It wasn't true, of course, but I was furious. "Then I'll pack my things, okay?" "Your things are in the guest room. Already packed." An hour later, I watched her climb into the cab. The driver helped stow her luggage. Luggage is a good word. I get rid of all my stuff. As the cab pulled away, I turned and looked at the bed. I love this bed, but I probably need a new mattress and a new rug. Epilogue. The house was quiet without her, and that suited him just fine. She took the rest of his belongings and his clothes. For a whole week, he spent rearranging things. Soon the house looked as if a woman had never lived in it. The next month's paper printed an interesting story on page 3. It reported that the new coach of the Wimbledon Tennis Club was not about to take office. Allegedly, there had been an unpleasant incident in a nearby parking lot. He was pushed into a Porsche and had the door slammed on his right arm. It was broken in 3 places, and doctors said he would never be able to play again. In my opinion, it was much worse than tennis elbow. While he was trapped, his attacker scribbled something on his other arm. Looks like Jojo. The police were investigating. He got a text message on his phone. I completed your project on time. Game, set, and match. Thank you, Sven.